Hey budget gardeners, Vita Loca here. Join me today as I answer some of your questions about me. So let's go. And while I'm chit-chatting, I'm going to be potting up some foxglove seedlings. If you can believe it, these are plants that were winter sown last winter. And I had taken them out of the milk jug and put them in this little container here. I have 2 of these containers and I really wanted to separate these little guys and pot each of them up. I have been meaning to pot up these poor foxgloves since last spring, and they've been sitting in my garage, which is why they're still alive. If they were outside, I'm sure they would be frozen, but they wouldn't be dead, they would just be dormant. I've been meaning to pot these up for a long time, but honestly, it's been so cold, I didn't have a lot of motivation to come out in the garage, which is why I put the poll out there. I figured I could be motivated by having you ask me questions, and then I could be answering those questions while I finally tackled this job. So thank you for anyone that participated. I'm going to make sure I answer as many questions as I can today. My first question is, what is the easiest plant for you to propagate? By seed, cutting, division, etc. So I'm going to start with cuttings. I love to propagate quite a few plants from cuttings because it's usually very easy. And it's going to vary from plant to plant. But some of the plants that I've had a lot of success with, and I definitely recommend you try, are impatiens as well as coleus. Those 2 plants are so easy to propagate. Actually, I'll add a few more. The sweet potato vine as well as a vinca vine. Look it up, but there are a ton of plants out there that you can take cuttings of and you can propagate very easily in a glass of water. The big thing is with any of these cuttings, you want to make sure that you're not putting them out in hot sun. You want to have them in a shady area. And you also want to make sure you're changing out the water every day. And then finally, you want to make sure you're removing those bottom leaves, because if you leave leaves in the water, then what's going to happen is the water is going to get murky and the plant might rot and die. In any videos that I've made that go over anything I talk about today, I'll try to remember to put a link to those videos in the description below in case you're interested. For example, how to take cuttings of plants. When it comes to propagating from seed, I would say some of the easiest plants that I've had success with would be tomatoes, cucumbers, and for flowers, I would say probably marigolds. Really, a lot of plants that have those nice big seeds are usually the easiest ones I found to propagate from seed. I would say the plants that have a smaller seed to them, they're not hard, but they might be a little bit trickier to propagate from seed. So in case you're wondering what some of those are, I would say impatiens have very small seeds, as do begonias. But they're not impossible to propagate from seed. I've had a lot of success with those. But I would say anything with a bigger seed is probably easier to propagate. And I don't have a lot of sun where I live, but the last house I lived at, I had a lot more sun, and I used to grow sunflower there, and that's very easy to grow from seed. For propagating through division, I have to tell you, this plant, I think people either love it or hate it. I've seen in the YouTube world, some people are pulling out their daylilies because they just don't like the way the foliage looks. I love daylilies, so I might thin them out because I have too many, but I don't foresee me fully getting rid of my daylilies. So I would say daylilies definitely love to be divided, and you can really increase your stock in daylilies around your yard. And I've done that. I started with not many plants of the Stella d'Oro daylily, and over the last number of years, I keep dividing and adding more of those plants to my landscape. I'm now at a point where I have too many of them, and they're now in my backyard plant nurseries, and they sell like hotcakes. People love the Stella d'Oro daylilies. So I would say that's probably one of the easiest plants that I've had to propagate from division. And for cuttings, another plant that I've had a lot of success with propagating from cuttings, and this time I'm going to talk about hardwood cuttings, would be roses as well as hydrangeas. I've had a lot of success with both of those. And that's why I've been making videos lately showing you my process for taking hardwood cuttings, because the winter time is the best time to be doing that. But you also can take cuttings of different plants at different times of the year. So if you wanted to take cuttings from, let's say, roses or hydrangeas, you don't have to do it in the winter. You definitely could do it in the springtime or even in the summertime. The next question is, what is my favorite part of gardening? I would say My most favorite part of gardening is enjoying the fruits of my labor. To walk around the yard early in the morning with a cup of coffee and just look at everything and see how everything's changing on a daily basis. That's probably the biggest thing that I enjoy about gardening in my yard. But I've learned over time that I also enjoy teaching others about gardening. And it's not just something I've been doing for the last few years through my YouTube channel. I've found that naturally, when people would come over and look at my flowers in my yard, they would start asking questions on how do you do this or why do you do that? And I noticed that I enjoyed answering those questions. And that was one of the few reasons why I started my YouTube channel, because I found that if just my friends or family members want to ask questions and want to learn from me, then maybe there's other people out there that want to learn from me as well. And I love sharing that knowledge with others. And I love learning all the time also, not only from all of you, but also through books and through other YouTube videos and by searching on the internet. And I've mentioned this in other videos, but another thing I really love about gardening is I find that it's very therapeutic. I call it therapy for my soul, but it's also a good physical exercise for me. I'm not a person that likes to go to the gym and work out. I never have like that. I'd much rather just be in my yard. And I find that just doing yard work is great exercise, both mental as well as physical exercise. The next question is a two-part question. It's where do you garden and do you have any winter sowing reveal videos? I'll answer the second part first. I do have winter sowing reveal videos, and I'll put links to those videos down in the description below. In terms of where do I garden in New England, in the state of New Hampshire, which is in the United States, and I garden in a USDA Zone 5B. My average last frost date is usually around middle to end of May. And that average last frost date is not based on the zone I live in. It's based on my zip code. So if you are curious what is your average last frost date, because that is so important to know as a gardener, I'll put a link to a great website that you can go to figure out what your average last frost date is. And not only do I garden at my home, I also adopted a spot a few years ago. It's about 30 minutes from my home, and it's in a quaint little town, and it has a rotary. And basically in the center of the rotary is a flower garden. And so I have been working in that area for a few years along with my husband, and I decided to get involved with adopting that spot for a few reasons. My husband is originally from that area, but also when that garden was created, it was dedicated to a few people, and one of those people was my father-in-law. I made just one video talking very briefly about that spot, but this year I am planning on bringing you to that area more often because I have a lot of work to do there. I've planted a lot of perennials over the last few years, but I also am planning on adding more perennials as well as dividing and moving perennials around there. So I'll be sure to make more videos of that area just to give you some inspiration. What I do love about that spot is it's quite a bit of sun there, and I don't have that much sun in my yard, so it's actually fun to play around in that garden space because there is a lot more sun there. The next question is, what did I do for a living before doing all this YouTube business? Well, grab a coffee. So I originally went to college to be a doctor or something. I was studying biology, and after I took a computer course and I got the easiest A I could ever earn, I realized that was my calling, was to work with computers. And so I worked for about 12 years as a software engineer, doing lots of different things. I worked in network administration, email administration, but then ultimately I spent a number of years doing website administration, programming and making changes to this company's website. And a lot of it was on the back end side, so on the programming side of it. But then eventually my husband and I decided for me to stay home and take care of our son full time. So I quit my job, and that's what I did. And then my daughter was born shortly thereafter. They're 20 months apart. And so she's 19 right now. And while I was a stay-at-home mom, I basically got involved with their school. And I was in their classroom as a mom helper from kindergarten through 8th grade, and I did it for both my kids. And then when my son went to high school in 9th grade, I said, well, the high school doesn't need me. So that's where my volunteering ends. And then when my daughter went to high school in 9th grade, she asked me if I could still be in her school because she actually liked me being in her school. So I ended up applying for a job there, and I did get it. It was as a robotics teacher, and I taught robotics at the high school for 4 years, and then I taught algebra there for 1 year. So I actually stayed there 1 year additional after both my kids had left. And in case you're wondering, how did I get into robotics? Because I didn't mention anything about that. When my son was, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 years old, he wanted to take a camp on robotics. And so I sent him to a camp. He really loved it. And I want to say my husband and I coached the robotics team for about 8 or 9 years. And it was not just our 2 kids that were on the robotics team, but it was a whole bunch of their friends as well. And it was a great opportunity. Our kids learned a lot. What I really loved about it was a great bonding experience for my family. And not only that, it opened up a great opportunity for me to be able to teach in my children's high school. And ultimately, when my kids graduated high school, I was able to go on the stage and present each of them with their high school diplomas, which was just such a wonderful experience. And I'm jumping around a little bit. The whole reason that I also volunteered at the Circle was because I knew my kids would be going to college, and in order to I want to say fill a void of sadness with both of my kids going to school, I wanted to do something that would make me happy. So that's why I actually started my YouTube channel. That's why I started my backyard plant nursery, and that's why I adopted that spot. Really just to fill up this time and this sadness that I was feeling with my kids going to college. And it was also around the time when both my parents passed away. So it's given me a lot of joy, and that's really why I do these things that I do, is to take my mind off of all these other things and make me happy, and hopefully make others happy as well. The next question is, have I ever grown a plant that I decided just wasn't the bother? And I can definitely say yes to this one. Now, keep in mind, you may feel differently because of your circumstance, but I'm going to tell you why I'm not going to most likely grow this plant again. It's Lisianthus, and it's not because, Lisianthus takes so long to grow from seed. I have the patience. I don't mind that part of it. I did grow Lisianthus from seed a few years ago, and I kind of thought it was I mean, it does need full sun. I don't have a lot of full sun in my yard, so I have to give up any area that I have in order to grow it. Also, even though I do like to cut flowers and maybe put a cute little bouquet together once in a while in the summertime, I'm not big into that. I'm not selling cut flowers, at least for right now. I'm not, and I don't know if I ever will. And I just thought it was okay. I mean, I think it's a pretty plant, and when I see it, in other people's gardens, I think it's very pretty. But I don't foresee myself growing Lisianthus anytime soon. I think if I had a lot of sun and a lot of space where I could have like a whole row of it and use it as a nice cut flower, then I would feel differently about it. The next question is, do I have a vegetable garden? So I mentioned earlier I used to live in a different house. That house had way more sun, way more space actually also. And I had a really nice vegetable garden there. And that was before I had kids. So I had time, I had space, and I had sun. And now the house we live in, it has a fair amount of space for sure, but quite a bit of that space is not full sun. And most vegetables do require full sun. So I have to be quite creative when I do grow my vegetables. A lot of times my vegetables end up being in pots, and I move those pots around in my yard where I get quite a bit of sun. So I don't have a dedicated nice big vegetable garden, but I do grow vegetables. Typically they're in pots. I have some fruit also, and I grow those in a raised bed. But my goal for this year is to expand a raised bed garden that I have in my backyard. It doesn't get a lot of sun, but we are splurging and getting a big tree cut down that will allow more sun to come into that area. And I have to redo that raised bed in the backyard. So to answer your question, I do vegetable gardening. I do them in pots or raised beds, and I'm hoping to have a much larger raised vegetable garden area in my backyard for this year. The next question is, have I ever gardened in any other zone? So again, I garden in zone 5B. My parents used to live in Massachusetts, and so that's where I grew up. And I don't know the gardening zone, but if I had to guess, it was either a 6A or 6B. It might have even been a 7. It was definitely warmer than where I live because they lived about an hour and 15 minutes south of where I live. So I used to do some gardening with my dad for sure. And I used to grow things from seed like when my kids were little, and I would bring down plants every year for Mother's Day to plant at my parents' home. And I would also then go back and I would weed their flower beds. So I did do some gardening down that area in Massachusetts. In fact, after my parents passed away and the house sold, I ended up digging up the peonies that were in their front yard, and I have them in my backyard where it's an area that doesn't get a ton of sun, so the peonies have never thrived. And I'm excited about getting that large tree cut down because hopefully I can now enjoy those peonies over the next many years, and they can really put on a show like they used to at my parents' house. I also did want to add, my parents did have a vegetable garden for a few years. I don't know how many, I was younger, but then they stopped. And then eventually when my nephew was born, we ended up putting a vegetable garden in at my parents' house so that my nephew could learn gardening. So that was a really fun experience to do with him. And then the next question is, if I never gardened in another growing zone, what would be my dream location? Well, I would say my dream location would be, no matter what the growing zone is, it would be great if it was just a lot more sun. I would love that. I would love to have more sun if possible. But in terms of dream location for growing zone, if I had to be in a different growing zone, I would say probably a zone 6, maybe even a zone 7. I think that for me would be a perfect sweet spot. It would open up a lot more opportunity for me to grow plants that are not hardy in my area. And I might even be able to overwinter my dahlias rather than digging them up every year. And yet it's not too hot. It's like it gets hot enough in those areas, but maybe not too hot. So I would say probably like where my parents lived in Massachusetts, a zone 6 or a zone 7. I think that would be a perfect zone for me. And then the next question is, what do I like or dislike about my zone? Now I know zone is not the same as average last frost date and all that business, but I'll just say what I dislike about where I live. I would say that the biggest thing is the size or the length of my growing season. My growing season is pretty much from the end of May through probably, I'd say September, I don't know, maybe even October, but not much beyond that. Basically, it's 5 months out of the 12 months of the year, I can't really be doing any gardening. That's a long time. I mean, I have plenty to keep me busy that's garden related, which is good, because otherwise I think that would really be unfortunate. But I wish I did have a longer growing season for sure. The next question is, what was the first thing that I grew and did it surprise me? I was really thinking hard about that because honestly, I've been gardening for about at least 30 years because I've been gardening since before my son was born. So I really don't remember the first thing I ever grew, but I was thinking about that question and I was talking to my husband about it. And we both agreed we think it was probably marigolds and probably some vegetables like tomatoes and cucumbers. So, and probably even peas. So I would say yes. I think that feeling of growing something, either buying a plant, but even especially growing something from seed and seeing it germinate and seeing it produce, I think it's like the best feeling in the world. And so those would be the first things that I think I can remember from 30 years ago that I first grew and I felt really good about. And I will add with that same question, the one thing I do remember distinctly is doing a lot of this growing from seed with my children when they were younger. I really loved doing that. And I noticed they loved doing that. We used to take, this, like the larger seeds and put them between a wet paper towel, and we would watch the seeds germinate. So then we could see how quickly or slowly different seeds germinated and see what the roots look like. They were a lot of fun projects that I used to do with the kids when they were little. Now, they're 19 and 21. They're busy with whatever they're doing in their lives. So they're not as interested like they used to be with watching a seed grow, but they appreciate what I do and they understand it, and they know how important it is for me. But that was something really fun that I used to love to do with my kids. The next question is about my plant nursery. Basically, how long have I been doing it? So I'm going on to my third year of growing plants out of my driveway. Although I have grown plants prior to that, like on Craigslist, but it was very infrequent. It was just like, oh, I have a few pots of a certain plant. Let me just put it on Craigslist and sell them. Now I actually, I put it on Facebook Marketplace, and I'm quite busy. I have a whole area dedicated to plants. So it really is a business for me, a little side hustle, you can call it. And I've really learned a lot since I started this about 3 years ago. And another question was also, what plants sell best as part of my backyard plant nursery? Definitely the Stelladoro daylilies were quite popular. And the foxglove that I sold a few years ago, I remember those totally sold out. Those were very popular. And hosta, everyone loves hosta. I think it's nice basically to have a mix of plants if you can, for both shade as well as sun, and then also plants that bloom at different times of the year. I did notice that if a plant is blooming, even if someone came and they weren't intending to buy that plant, if they see it in bloom, they're like, ooh, what is that? And they just need to have it. And a few months later, if that plant is not blooming anymore, usually, unless someone specifically was looking for that plant, the likelihood of selling that plant goes down more and more. So in other words, the plants that are in bloom sell much easier than the plants that are not in bloom. So it's always good in your plant nursery to always have something blooming. And I have a whole playlist on my backyard plant nursery. And I even talk about lessons learned after year 1 of my nursery, year 2 of my nursery. And I'll put a link to that playlist down below. The next question is how to get rid of fungus gnats in potting mix. Well, I don't know. I can't stand fungus gnats. I really can't stand them in my house. I know some people can live with them with their house plants or when they're seed starting, and they're perfectly fine with it. Honestly, it drives me crazy, and it doesn't just drive me crazy, it drives my kids crazy. We're all covering our drinks with a plate because the fungus gnats are attacking our water. So yeah, it's definitely something I don't enjoy. And one thing that I do that I found really helps is I always sterilize my seed starting or my potting mix. And I do that by putting boiling hot water on it. And I've made videos on that as well, and I'll put it down in the description. But I really make sure I do whatever I can to eliminate or at least lessen the fungus gnat infestation. And I've found that putting the boiling hot water helps kill the fungus gnat eggs that are living in there. You just want to make sure you're really mixing up that potting mix after you put hot boiling water on it. Mix it up really good, get every single corner of it, and then I put like a cover on top of it and try to seal in the heat to really kill those fungus gnat eggs. And the other thing is that will just kill the fungus gnat eggs. That's not going to kill the fungus gnats that are flying around in your house. You want to get those yellow sticky traps, and that will trap the adults that have hatched and are flying around. And then you also want to be watering with something like mosquito bits. And that really helps as well. A lot of times if your soil is too wet when you're starting seeds indoors, that's like the perfect breeding ground for those fungus gnats. So you don't want your soil to be too wet inside. You want your plants to dry out actually quite a bit in between watering. So I think all of that should help with fungus gnats. But if you have an infestation, you really want to try to get a handle on that. And you can do that again by getting the sticky traps and the mosquito bits and not watering too much. But good luck if anyone's running into fungus gnats. I'm thinking of you. And then the final question, which is perfect because we are all done here. Well, I'm not done with all of these. And I'm not done with all of these. Maybe we should do another question and answer so you can motivate me to get all these done, and then I can answer some of your questions. Let me know. The final question is about whether or not I'm a master gardener. I want to say about a year ago, my husband sent me a link and said I should consider being a master gardener. And I looked into it, and never say never with anything in your life, including whether or not you'll be a master gardener. But I looked into it at the time, and I thought about it really hard, and I decided not to do it. So I am not a master gardener. I have only just been gardening through experience for the last 30 years. I learned a lot from my mother-in-law. She was an avid gardener. I also learned a lot from my dad. I used to be his helper in the garden. And then I've just learned a lot on my own through trial and error, which I think is really the best way a lot of us can learn, is through experimenting, through trial and error, through not giving up. You know, when it comes to videos like mine or anyone else's that you're watching, learn from them, but take it with a grain of salt and then try it yourself and then adjust and see what works for you. So I'm not sure if I'll ever go for the Master Gardener program, but I'm not currently one. And for me, the best way that I learn also is I just love researching. I love looking stuff up on the internet, and I love going on multiple different sites. And they're usually actually not videos. Sometimes they are, but a lot of times it might be just different websites that are more reputable websites and reading about stuff. So that's it. Those are all the questions that I had. I thank you again for everyone that participated. I really appreciate it. You helped me out by motivating me to get these potted up, and I am so excited, and I just need to keep on doing this. These did not bloom for me last year. They didn't have a chance to because they were so small. So you never know, they might actually bloom this year. We'll see. Let me know if you want me to do more of these Q&As, and if so, keep sending me some more questions and I'd be happy to do it. A couple of things I wanted to throw out there about me in case you're wondering. I always wear a hat. Even when I'm inside, actually once this video is done, the hat comes off, but for my videos, I wear a hat even inside. And I do that for a number of reasons. You know, I'm not going to lie to you. When I garden, I just love to garden. I don't like to wear makeup because I'm not a makeup person. I don't like to do my hair. I just want to do what I love to do, which is gardening. So if I throw on a baseball cap, that's the reason why, is just because I comb my hair and I threw a hat on. I didn't have to style it or anything. And even with my nails, I'm not a big nail polish person. I've been doing my nails because I'm doing close-up shots of seed starting, but I can't stand doing my nails because one little chip bugs me. Budget gardening with Vita Loca. So the reason I'm big into budget gardening is after I quit my job and we were on one income, we really learned to live on a budget. It was very important for our family. And so I would go to Goodwill all the time, and I still go to Goodwill all the time, and yard sales and things like that. So it's kind of been ingrained in me for the last 20 plus years since I had my kids. And so when it comes to gardening, I love gardening, but I don't like to spend a lot of money on it because for me it's a hobby. It's something that makes me happy, but it's not a necessity for our family. So although growing food is really nice. I mean, it's nice to have your own fresh vegetables. You save a lot of money that way too. So that's where the whole budget part comes into play, because I've just learned to live on a budget for many years. Vita is because of my full name, Kavita, and a lot of people call me Vita. It's just easier. And then Loca, I know that's weird, but you know that Ricky Martin song, Livin' La Vida Loca? My friend Mike used to joke and sing that song like that, and so that's where that came from, Vita Loca. Oh, and a final thing I wanted to share. A lot of times you'll see me wearing like, you know, Red Sox or Patriots or college stuff. I pretty much wear whatever my kids don't want. So if they're done wearing a sweatshirt or sweatpants, like right now I'm wearing my son's sweatpants, hey, I mean, we already paid for it. Why get rid of it if it's perfectly good? So a lot of the things that I wear are just things that were hand-me-downs from my children. They take things that I have, I take things that they have. It's a great relationship. So I just wanted to share that as well. One day, maybe I'll update my wardrobe and wear something nicer and fancier, but I'm more comfortable wearing this type of stuff anyway. Okay, I need to clean up all this mess, and I thank you if you watched this video all the way to the end. If you like this type of format of a video, please hit the like button. And until the next video, make it a great day with gardening.